Shalom, shalom. Want to first and foremost give honor and praise unto the Most High, the creator of heaven and earth. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is this is the takedown. Hebrew Israelites respond, part 2b. The term Israel is said by some to mean from Isis, Ra, and El. And that's what I want to present right now to show emphatically that such is not the case. Now, I wrote an article on that particular subject. And as the saying goes, like to hear it, here it go. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High. The point in this subject is to show that Israel is not from the goddesses or gods Isis, Ra, and El. Isis is what the Greeks called the Egyptian god or Set. Long before the Greeks had any contact with the Egyptians, we see the name Israel written in Egyptian records. Merneptah, who was the successor of Ramses II, is said to have written Israel in a stela. Some state that Merneptah took the stela from a pharaoh who ruled before him named Amenhotep III of the 18th dynasty. Scholars actually debate whether or not what is referred to as the Merneptah stela was really the stela of Merneptah, or whether a stela of Amenhotep III that was used by Merneptah later on in history. You understand? So, not really going to sit there and get into that particular thing, which one it was it Amenhotep or was it Merneptah? Because that's a historical issue. What we're going to focus right now and deal with is the aspect of the linguistics in this particular case. Then later on in this presentation, we'll sit there and have a discussion about the actual issue of the history and context. Because what happens quite often is people do not know, no offense intended, how to put history in context. And that unfortunately comes from when you're sitting there looking at something only from Egypt this and only from Egypt that. So anything else to you is kind of foreign because everything to you is Egypt this or Egypt that. And that right there is kind of a biased way to look at a situation. You understand? So let that be understood. The word Yisrael in Hebrew is a compound word. The word Yisra means he will contend. And El in Hebrew means God, means might, means power. Yisra is a Lamed Hey verb. Lamed Hey verbs are any verb in Hebrew that ends with the letter Hey. All right? So let that be understood. And Hey, said by some as Ha, is actually the fifth letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Yisra comes from the Lamed Hey verb Sarah, which means he contended. The root of it. Yisra is the third person masculine singular in the future tense, which means he will contend. So you have Sarah, which means he contended, and then you got Yisra, which means he will contend. All right? The word Yisrael from Sarah also means to rule. So it means to contend, and it also means to rule. You understand? So let that be known and understood. Now, I want to sit there and show a picture, if we will, of the word Yisrael and explain it from this point. You see, Yisrael, the Yod, the Sin, the Resh, the Aleph, the Lamed. This is not Isis, Ra, and El. So let that be understood. All right? So it's not Israel. It's not saying that either, brothers and sisters. All right? So it's a compound word, Yisra and El. Now, you actually had an individual who was saying that it came from Isis, Ra, and El. But let's explain from Egyptian sources how that too is also inaccurate. Isis was not what the Egyptians called their female goddess, which they worshipped since the Old Kingdom era of Egypt, which is in this particular case, 4th dynasty, 5th dynasty, so forth. She was considered the daughter of Jeb and Nut. Now, anybody understanding the Egyptian pantheon of gods and so forth and so on, Geb and Nut were the children of who they call Tefnut and Shu. And Tefnut and Shu was the children in Egyptian pantheon of what they call Atum. Now, when you go into the pyramid text, what they call Utterance 527, it explains how in Egyptian concept, how they said Atum masturbated the world into existence. We went over that in another presentation. So now, according to the Egyptian pantheon of gods and goddesses and so forth and so on, what the Greeks later on called Isis was called or set by the ancient Egyptians. Right? Now let's move on. Ra was called Re inside the Egyptian language. In the nomens of the Egyptian pharaohs, such as Amos, Nebetare of the 18th dynasty, or Necho Wehemibre of the 26th dynasty, Re was an Egyptian god in reference to the sun. Ra actually came about due to the time when somebody else was trying to say the Egyptian god Ra in their own particular way. This is why when you look at the pharaoh's names, such as in the case of Amos Nebetare, you will never see that R-E spelled as a R-A, because they know that it's Re and not Ra inside the Egyptian language. All right. Now, in Hebrew, the word El is from the Hebrew word Ayil, which means to be mighty or to have power. And El is not from Egypt. So there was a gentleman, no offense intended, they ain't going to blow up nobody's names. And he was saying in a video when he was debating another Israelite brother that Isis, Ra, and El were Egyptian gods and goddesses. No, it's not. Because in Egyptian, there is no El. That's why when you look at Egyptian writings, you don't see anything with an L in none of their pharaohs' names until you get to the time when the Ptolemies were there. And what they used previous to that, for instance, and you look at the walls of Karnak, they used what we went over before called metathesis. So the word, for instance, when Thutmose III said he conquered the land, which we call in Hebrew as Ayalon, in the ancient Egyptian, they didn't say it as Ayalon. They say it as Ayer, because of the simple fact that the R, which is used by the open mouth inside the metroneta or the hieroglyphs itself, that represented the L in other languages. It was referred to as metathesis. If you can show any pharaoh from Menes or Aha or Namir from what they call the Dynasty 1 all the way right down before the time of any infiltration from the Persians or later on the Greeks that had an L inside of their pharaoh's names, please show, because there is no L inside the Egyptian language. Just like there's no J inside the Hebrew language. All right, now let's move on. We now see that there's no way that Isis is not from Egypt, neither is Ra from Egypt, neither is El from Egypt. So how can somebody then say that Israel is Isis, Ra, and El coming out of Egypt? Because people are not using their understanding. See, when you're hating in the street terms, you're hating on someone, it blocks your wisdom. Now let's sit there and get, as they try to sit there and say, let's get scholastic. Yeah, this is one of my favorite books here, Babylon and Timbuktu. All right, but getting back to the point here, we have what they have is written as Orset, not Isis. You would never find Isis inside of any Egyptian record that's not Greek flavored, because Isis is not Egyptian. Now this here is what they say is from the Meneptah Stela. We went over this in a video before. Okay, the YSRIAR. Israel, the foreign people, is subdued. His seed is not. You see? So this little thing that they got right here represents an ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, brothers and sisters. The fact that it's talking about an actual people. There are all kinds of scholars that get into this particular subject. You understand? It's only a couple of individuals who try to sit there and state, oh, Meneptah and the Stela was talking about each and every single body else, but just Israel is some. I was like, no, emphatically incorrect. All right, now, I want to sit there and go over a situation right here. I have a book here entitled The Ancient Near Eastern Text. The Ancient Near East in text and pictures, that is. Pardon me. And I want to go on page 231 in this book. All right? And it reads as follows. On page 231. The hymn of victory of Meneptah or Meneptah. It says in translation, the princes are prostrate, saying mercy. Not one raises his head among the 9 bowls. Desolation is for Tehanu. Hati is pacified. Plundered is the Canaan with every evil. Carried off is Ashkelon. Seized is upon Gezer. Yanoam is made as that which did not exist. Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. Huru is become a widow for Egypt. All lands together they are pacified. Everyone who was restless, he has been bound up by the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. That's part of the Meneptah Stela, which some people state that he actually put his name on after the other pharaoh, Amenhotep III, actually did those acts. But that's another subject. It distinctly mentions a couple of things, right? Tehenu also said a Tejenu. That's Libya. So the point I'm getting to is if your person doesn't understand certain kinds of things about cultures, linguistics, and so forth and so on, you're kind of out of place trying to sit there and speak. Do I know Metu Neter totally? No, I am still in the process of learning it. But from my current studies, and correct me if I'm wrong, it mentions Canaan here. See, in a video that a particular person did, he said that you can find Egypt, Africa, Nubia, Kush, but you can't find Canaan. But meanwhile, the ancient Egyptians actually spoke about the Canaanites. So sometimes, see, when you're hating, it blocks your vision and your wisdom. When you're arrogant, it blocks your knowledge. You understand? It says, Yanoam is made as that which did not exist. Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. Now, of course, many scholars are out there saying that that was actually a boast made by Merneptah, but actuality it wasn't true because the seed of Israel was still recorded in the earth. So Egyptians basically, brothers and sisters, don't want to give people the idea, oh, the Israelites are just hating on the Egyptians. No, what it is, ancient Egypt wrote for ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians did not write for the entire world. See, what the so-called conscious community doing with a bunch of brothers who are consider themselves like the Kemetic science and so forth and so on, what they're doing is they taking Egyptian records and then sitting up there saying that that means that everything in the world got to match up to Egyptian records. Nah, that's not accurate because that's just as wise as saying that everything got to match up to Assyrian records or Babylonian records or not knocking myself as an Israelite or biblical records. You understand what I'm saying? Every nation writes their own particular history. So that's just what it is as far as that's concerned. What our people unfortunately don't understand is the difference between nationality, ethnicity, and color. Because what it is, they looked at the walls of Medinet Habu and said, you know what, they're black, I'm black, that must be me. So forget the fact that you got people in the continent of Africa itself laying claim to be in Israel. Let's just sit there and all try to say Kemet this and then Kemet that and so forth and so on. Went over that in another presentation. But just want to sit there and state and conclude in this subject right here that Israel is not from Isis, Ra, and El. Isis is not even Egyptian. There's not one papyrus, not one scarab, not one stela that you're going to sit there and be able to show, brothers and sisters, where they have it to where Israel is said as Isis, Ra, and El. It's not going to be there. Okay? So what the Greeks called Isis, the Egyptians called Orset. So let that be understood. So with that, I say shalom on that. Have a good day. Thank you for the time.